And I think TMF sort of has traditionally been seen as this like group of people that work in a dark basement and that like only get let out at the Christmas party, right? And in reality, the people that I've met through my career, working, sort of adjacent or surrounding TMF, is that these people are, they're just as fun as everybody else. Do we have some nerdy profiles? Of course, but that doesn't mean they're not fun. And I think that there's lots to be said about the role that TMF has played up until now, or up until the last few years, but also what TMF means today, right? A big part of the journey that I've been on is sort of trying to reposition TMF as this sort of fun, enjoyable, high impact area of clinical trials and high impact part of developing and releasing new drugs.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the TMF Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Palmer. Today, you're in for a real treat. Let me ask you something. What do you think happens when someone stops settling for the old ways of doing things and stays wildly curious and believes the best work isn't born from pressure, but from joy? I'll tell you what happens. They become unstoppable. They build teams people actually want to be on. They bring purpose into the process, and that's when the real momentum kicks in. And you get Oliver Pierce. This is someone who just didn't build marketing teams. He built movements. He took a traditional, slow-moving industry and he flipped it on its head through a bold, disruptive strategy. And today, Oliver leads the global growth as the head of marketing at Epista Life Sciences. But more than that, he's the living, breathing example of what happens when you keep curiosity at the center, lead with joy, and create a community that makes marketing more than just campaigns. It becomes culture. In this episode, we're diving deep into TMF culture. We're talking about how to build teams that thrive, create environments that encourage instinct and insight, and why the best ideas are often born not in boardrooms, but in momentums of laughter and experimentation. So buckle up. This one's not just about marketing, it's about mindset, mission, and movement. Let's get into it. Oliver, welcome to the TMF Daily Podcast.
Thank you, Nicole. That was quite an introduction. I don't know if I'm going to live up to all of these promises you've made about our conversation, but I will certainly give it a good go.
So let's just start here. Like, culture isn't what's written on the walls. It's how people show up when no one's watching. And in your experience, what really defines like a strong TMF culture, and how do you build that from like the inside out?
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Culture is one of those things that's so interesting because I think a lot of people have opinions about what culture is. And I think culture is one of those things that's nurtured. I don't think you can really create it. You can be intentional about it, but you can't engineer it. You can't sort of say, well, we move this here, we move that there, we put this block on top of this block, and now we have a culture. And so I think when you think about it from a TMF perspective, where we think about TMF professionals and the roles that they have, it's easy to sort of get sucked into, well, what do we want TMF people to do? What do we want TMFers to actually do? What do we want them to, how do we want them to work? And then let's build these blocks, right? And then we'll call that our culture. But I think, I've spent a lot of time speaking with TMFers who have led small teams, TMFers that have led large teams, people that have been a part of teams. And I think the teams that I've seen that have great culture always are rooted in a deep sense of ownership and accountability. Like that is really where it starts. If you don't have someone that feels empowered to own something and own a piece of the work that they're doing, or that they're accountable to something as an output, then you've lost the battle already. You're not going to be able to get what you're looking for. So that was sort of be, kind of where I would start.
Let's talk a little bit like high pressure. And you've worked in some high pressure, highly regulated environments, and you still found a way to create cultures that are like fun, innovative, and still like human. Like, how do you strike the balance between that structure, the freedom, especially in the TMF teams?
You have to have fun, right? You have to enjoy what you're doing. And a big part of what I've been lucky to be a part of within the TMF world has been about creating this fun side of TMF. Now, I didn't coin the term too much fun. I think that might have been Karen Roy or somebody long before my time. But there's this really interesting, unique subculture within TMF that is this. Yes, what we do perhaps can be perceived as dry, boring. Lots of people talk about it in that light, but there's, when you speak to a true TMFer that have been in it for a while, you don't get the sense of that they're this sort of stuffy, boring person, right? And so I think there is that sort of undertone of fun, and I think that's what you have to bring to it. And I've made probably a big part of my career out of being less serious when it comes to things like TMF, whether that be having fun interviewing people kind of like in the setting that we are today, or whether that be hosting big large scale events or meetups or things like that are more community focused. So I think it's really just about having fun.
And I love that about you because you do make it fun. And there is this sort of maybe misconception that us TMFers were sort of like nerdy and boring. And maybe you would agree, like, there's two types of people in this industry. You either love the TMF or you hate it. And you can immediately tell when you talk to someone.
Mm-hmm. I think that there are definitely some people out there that love it, but I think that there are some people that probably love more the journey or the process or the impact, right? And I think TMF sort of has traditionally been seen as this like group of people that work in the dark basement and that like only get let out at the Christmas party, right? And in reality, the people that I've met through my career, working, sort of adjacent or surrounding TMF, is that these people are, they're just as fun as everybody else. Do we have some nerdy profiles? Of course, but that doesn't mean they're not fun. And I think that there's lots to be said about the role that TMF has played up until now, or up until the last few years, but also what TMF means today, right? And a big part of the journey that I've been on is sort of trying to reposition TMF as this sort of fun, enjoyable, high impact area of clinical trials and high impact part of developing and releasing new drugs. And I think there are obviously so many other people that are doing the same thing. And you see that, right? When you go to a conference, when you see people in person, these are great, fun, interesting people that certainly shouldn't be kept in the basement, right? And I think that's the main point here.
Let's talk a little bit like about belonging and how do you build a TMF community where people don't just do the work, but they actually care about the mission and the quality and about each other.
Yeah, so what I've noticed about the TMF community, right, in itself is that we all have yearned for this sort of connection to other people that live in the same realm as us, right? And for many, many years, there were just one or two conferences that you could attend, and that was how you met other people that did what you did, right? Every time you sat down at a holiday party or a Thanksgiving, and someone says, "Well, what do you do?" And then you have to try and figure out how to say what you do in a way that sounds fun and interesting when on the surface maybe it doesn't seem that way, right? But now, then they had this forum, this place that they could, where other people got them, right? And I think part of building that community is understanding that what I've realized, at least, and maybe this is unique to TMF professionals, is that there's this sort of real yearning for community. There's this real yearning for relatability. So whether that be people wanting to wear a t-shirt that says something TMF related on it, or whether that's someone flying the flag for TMF or being a part of something interesting and different, I've only ever had such great response from the TMF community in getting involved in some of these activities that I've put together, some events I've put together, community type events. I've only ever had good things come from those people. And I think that's a testament to the types of people that are in this space. And maybe it's because for so long we've been looking for these forums, and now we have them. You create a space, they'll be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know about you, but when I was starting out in clinical research before the CDISC TMF reference model community, when they came, well, it was the DIA back then,
Yeah.
it was like a breath of fresh air, like, these are my people.
Exactly, right. And in everything that we do, whether that's a new town that we move to and we're looking for I don't know, a pickleball club or a soccer team that we can all get behind, as human beings in general, we like to find groups of people that we have something in common with. And that's no different than in the TMF world. I think what's different and unique is that there aren't that many of us, although surprisingly there are more than people would think, TMFers. But because there aren't, there haven't been so many opportunities in the past to be able to connect and be around each other. When we do get the opportunity, I think it's sort of amplified, right? Everybody gets a little bit more excited, and that's why when we did things like TMF week, we had such an overwhelming response. When I launched my own sort of TMF podcast a couple of years ago, we had such an overwhelming response. Now that I'm doing sort of more in-person meetups and things like that around TMF, we're getting this really great response, and I think that's just part of what you can expect now with the TMF space.
I love it. It's almost like our TMF family reunion. We're getting everybody together and we're just catching up on what we're doing, and you feel the energy.
Exactly. Yeah.
In a world where there's a lot of checklists with the TMF and we're totally focused on compliance, like, how do we keep the spark alive? Like, how do we create this space of creativity and the curiosity and that joy within this TMF environment?
It goes back to what I was saying before about accountability and ownership, right? If people feel empowered, owning a part of what they do, and you get them excited about the outcome and that feel that they're part of the journey and part of the solution, that's what keeps things going. I think a lot of TMFers will take pride in the fact that they're part of a larger solution, right? Whether that be a new therapy or a new drug or a new device. I think that keeps that spark going. But I do think it's important to help TMFers get recognition outside of their role. And this goes back to what we were talking about, sort of internal culture. From all the people I've spoke to, the people I've worked with, the kind of the role that I've played in this space, TMF culture isn't just about TMF teams. It's about the teams that are beyond, that are working in other parts of the business. So whether that be the larger clinical team, whether that be regulatory teams or other teams that may have a TMF input or they're contributing TMF related content, if you can make sure that TMF is centered in an organization, then it makes the TMFers that much more happy because they're not having to like poke and prod and get people to do what they need to do. And then the others in the organization don't feel like TMF is just a chore, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really where it is like recentering on what is the importance of TMF from a larger output perspective. Like, what does this do in service to our business, right? Whether that be bringing new therapy to market, getting a drug approved, moving, something through the clinical development process. These are all outcomes that I think everybody in an organization is typically working towards. If you can connect that to the importance and value of where TMF sits in that conversation, I think that improves the culture of TMF and people's buy-in to actually involving themselves in the TMF process. And the downstream impact of that is, happier, more enjoyable TMF teams.
I think you're absolutely right, because sometimes there's a lot of misconception in the TMF space. Like, if you don't understand the TMF from like the outsiders or the people who aren't working in it, or the paper pushers, oh, you just file documents, and then you sort of like believe, oh, I'm just that person who looks at paperwork and files it. And then you lose that spark because there's no credibility. There's no like, well, no, when the FDA comes in, they want to see the work that we filed. They're like the first ones that says, show me your TMF. Like, that's a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. And look, the role of a TMFer has changed a lot over the last, 10, 20 years. If we, I joked earlier about being stuck in the basement and brought out during the Christmas party, but ultimately, that's sort of where this profession started, right? Where it was filing cabinets and folders and putting things in storage. But thankfully, with the introduction of technology, systems, places, and things like that, that we would store this documentation, the role of a TMFer has expanded. And I think now with the introduction of artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of the kind of AI technology that's available in the space, obviously there are lots and lots of technology providers that are available, providing lots of different tools for TMF. The role of a TMFer has changed and will continue to change, especially as we start to be more data driven and TMF becomes less about documents and more about data. The TMF role itself will move much more away from this sort of archivist filing documents, which is perhaps, like you said, what people assume a TMF professional does, and much more towards someone that is able to review and analyze data, understand data, look at using tools like AI to better manipulate data or change the outcome. And I think then you start to get TMF professionals that are much more strategic, much more data driven, just a completely different profile altogether, right? And I think that's going to inject new life into the area. I think it's gonna change the way that we recruit new people to come into the space, right? I can't imagine you doing a university tour and saying, "Hey, come work in TMF to file documents as your career path." But if you start to talk to them about the impact that TMF related data can have on our ability to scale, not just the program that would, the one program, but also multiple clinical programs, that is going to change the kind of uptake, I think, or the interest from folks that are coming into the industry perhaps for the first time. So I think there's lots and lots going on here, and the role of a TMF will change significantly over the next few years, as it has done over the last 10, 20.
Let's expand on that a little bit. You're making some good points. There's a lot of people, and I'm sure you know a lot of people in this industry. You talk to a lot of people in this industry, and people in the TMF space, especially the job seekers, they're scared when it comes to AI. They're not really embracing it because they're afraid it's going to replace their job. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, let's just be real here, right? Like, it will replace large portions of TMFers' jobs today, but that doesn't mean that there won't be a need for an individual that understands TMF and the role that TMF plays. I think it'll just change the way that they work, right? And for those individuals that are sort of not adopting it, perhaps it'll be more difficult for them. And maybe on the flip side, what I would say is that, if you're truly passionate about this area, there's lots and lots of resources available already, and there are already lots of very, very smart people talking about AI and the impact of AI within clinical trials, and then even within trial master files. If you can become more knowledgeable around those areas, if you can understand the potential impact, I think that you're going to not only extend your shelf life as a TMF professional, but perhaps even level yourself up, right, and become a more attractive candidate. So my advice to those individuals, just like anybody, I think in any profession, AI is disrupting every industry right now. Those that embrace AI, those that leverage it and learn how to use it to their best advantage, are the ones that will ultimately get what they want out of it, and will continue to grow their career. Those that are apprehensive, those that dismiss it, those are the ones I think are going to find it a little bit more difficult. Whether we like it or not, the way that this space is working is changing, and it has changed already, and it will change far more in the next few years because of the introduction of these tools and perhaps others.
It's not going anywhere.
Certainly not. It can be overwhelming, right? And I understand, people's perspective, especially perhaps those that have been in TMF roles for a long time, who've already built a long and storied career. But I would say, you have so much knowledge and expertise and perspective that an artificial intelligence tool likely doesn't have. And just imagine what you could achieve if you combine those two things, right? Artificial intelligence is great at consuming data, being able to, act almost as a concierge or as a support staff for you. If you're able to teach it what you know and combine forces, think about what an incredible team you could be, right? Yes, it is a little bit daunting because it is perhaps a little bit more techy and you need to be a little bit more tech savvy, but there are lots of ways that you can explore using AI in your personal life, which is often where we find, new things first. Start there, like I'm sure there are many people that will watch or listen to this conversation that we're having that are probably already using ChatGPT or Copilot or one of the other, large language model AI tools to, like me, plan out their meals for the week or figure out how they're going to fit all of these activities that you've planned for your children. There's lots and lots of benefits to be able to do it. To being able to understand it, start in your personal life, and then perhaps explore it in your professional life with the approval of the organization, of course. There's lots and lots of things that you can do with it, and I think the possibilities are almost endless. And I think in a few years we'll start to see AI being used on a one-to-one personal basis in TMF on almost everywhere.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about trust and like what role does trust play in building like TMF culture? How do you create that environment where people feel like safe to speak up or take that ownership, like you were saying before, and really push that envelope when we're in this heavily regulated space?
There's trust that's earned, and then there's trust that's given, right? I think as leaders, we have to empower people to make their own decisions, which means trusting them to do that. I think if you have leaders that are, sort of more micromanagement and that are more sort of day-to-day focused on exactly what you're doing, then perhaps those leaders are the ones that are holding those individuals back a little. I think when you give someone latitude and you give someone a longer leash, let's say, or the ability to problem solve on their own, do the things that they need to do, you tend to get better outcomes than if you were to say, well, I want you to show me everything that you do at every step of your process. That becomes a bit of an issue, especially when we're in such a detail-oriented world like TMF, right? So I think trust comes from, a level of confidence as a leader. If you can't trust the people in your team, then either you're the problem or the people in your team are, and something needs to change. Trust is often built around, putting in place good structure within an organization, good structure within the team, making sure there's great training. If you're doing all of those things internally, it's far easier for you to trust the people in your team because you know that you've done everything you can to prepare them for the job that they have in front of them. And then you don't have to be on top of them, peering over their desk while they're working. You can trust them to do what they need to do. And you'll be surprised at the magic that someone can produce when you trust them to do it, especially if you have the right person.
Speaking of magic, like if you could wave your magic wand and just change like one mindset across the TMF world, like what would be like the immediate thing you'd want to improve in the TMF culture and community, and why?
I think there's so much going on in this space at the moment. We talked about AI a little bit. We talked a little bit about the technology ecosystem. There are lots and lots of eTMF providers, lots of other eTMF adjacent technology that's being released, and there'll only ever continue to be more. I think what I would like to see is, people really think about what is important to their organization and not just do what other people do. I think we tend to have a sort of sense of comfort in going down a path that someone else has already gone down, right? And that might be a technology decision. Okay, I'm going to go work with a big provider that provides lots of platform tools that everybody uses, and that's going to make me feel comfortable and safe. Or whether that's, structuring my team in a certain way because that's the way I worked in my last organization. I think it's important to really think about what your team needs, what your organization needs, and work backwards from the objective. And maybe it isn't that big, shiny, expensive platform. Maybe it's something a little bit leaner, or maybe it's not, that sort of big team that you want to bring in-house. Maybe it's working with a trusted provider and building out a sort of internal and external team. So I just think it's more about like, you've got to think about the structure of how you want your teams to work and the decisions that you make, and don't try and apply the same rules to everything. I see that happening day in and day out. A lot of the conversations I have is, oh, I've worked with this tool before, or I've had this type of team before, or we worked in this way before. And while some of those historical experiences are useful, they're not always applicable in every environment. And it's really, really important if I speak to a leader It's about trying to figure out what's best for what you see in front of you right now, right? And what's best for us to put in place right now versus some sort of utopian, dream that perhaps is completely unachievable for whatever reason. The other thing too is like I've built, like I said at the beginning, I've built a big part of my career on trying to propel the TMF community, and so I would love to see us interacting more as a team beyond the 1 or 2 conferences that we might attend a year. So whether that's more local regional meetups like some of the things that I'm trying to do, or whether that be more sort of digital online communities for TMF professionals, I'd love to see us come together more. I think there's so much institutional knowledge and industry knowledge that we all have that we only really get a glimpse of when we sit in a presentation or speak to somebody at lunch or whatever it might be, whatever the situation may be. If we gave ourselves the opportunity to be with each other, whether face-to-face or online a little bit more often, I think we'd be able to move things along a little faster, and maybe we would have better outcomes at the end of it.
Yes, uncensored.
Exactly. Kind of like a Reddit for TMF. If that doesn't exist, like someone please create it. Maybe I'll do it right after this.
So can we actually just talk about like what you're doing with the TMF community for those
Yeah,
who
let's do
don't
that.
know?
Well, so many people probably know me from the work that I did while I was working at Montreal, which is a fantastic organization. I was there for 12 years and left there late last year. So we did things like TMF Week, which has become the largest virtual TMF conference on the planet. In fact, it's the largest gathering of TMF professionals ever known, I guess, is the most dramatic way to describe it. It's still going on. So that the team at Montreal still are putting together a great event. I think that's going to be in June. So I've done a lot of things like that in the past, lots of digital stuff, and I'll continue to do those types of things. And I'm, as long as my mission is always to continue to create an opportunity for us to connect within the community. But one of the things I'm really focusing on right now, kind of like what I alluded to in the last question that you had, was this sort of personal in-person connection. In May, I'll be running the first of these sort of in-person events that I'm looking to do more and more of in Princeton, New Jersey, called TMFers of New Jersey. And that was on May 21st. And we launched that last week, and within 24 hours, we had sold out the event already.
That is incredible.
So that just shows you, I think, the level of interest around these types of in-person events. And so I'm looking to sort of scale that up. We're looking for cities and places for us to bring these sort of TMF focused events. So whether that be TMFers of Boston, TMFers of the Bay Area, TMFers of Raleigh, bringing these sort of more community focused TMF events. And maybe we'll get together as a national TMF community at some point, or maybe I'll just keep it small, but really focusing on trying to prioritize those in-person connections. It's a big part of, I want to continue to give back to the TMF community like it's given to me. And obviously it's great to see some of my friends and people that we've worked with for so long in person. So that's the main thing. There'll probably be some other silly, interesting, fun things that I'll do over the next few months that everyone will get involved in, I imagine.
Can we talk maybe a little bit more in depth of like, what are people going to expect when they show up for the first one in New Jersey, for example?
Yeah. So look, I think we've all spent enough time at the sort of stuffy conference, sit down on an uncomfortable chair and listen to someone talk at a presentation for half an hour. We certainly didn't want to create something like that. We wanted to create an event that was a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more informal, that allows us to create personal connections. So meet people in our space that maybe we haven't met before. So there's going to be a lot of networking and one-on-one. So you can sort of imagine like little name badges and things like that. One of the things that was important to me also was to sort of try and find a way to bring in a local TMFer. And thankfully, like you mentioned, through this fun career I've had in TMF, I've managed to make lots of great friends in lots of different places. We will actually be sitting down for sort of a fireside chat where I will actually interview Jamie Marie Toth, who is the sort of incoming chair of the TMF reference model, which is fantastic. So she'll be taking over that spot in a few years' time. And she's also the global head of TMF at B1 Medicine, so formerly Beijing. And she's a New Jersey native. So it just made sense for us to launch this event with Jamie. And so she'll be coming along for a conversation. And then, of course, drinks and food and all those fun things. So you'll just get a chance to sort of have an informal meetup, basically, with others. We're also doing some fun TMFers of New Jersey t-shirts. So I think the first 20 people that registered also get a free tee that they can wear with pride as their sort of TMFer of New Jersey brand. And we'll do something similar then, I guess, in other areas. So we'll probably take a small break during the summer and then come back. And I think the next one will probably be in Boston in September and maybe a few others later on. So that's the general format. Like, again, we don't want it to be stuffy. We don't want people to have to sit down and listen to someone talk. The conversation that Jamie and I will have will be, fairly informal, and we'll largely talk about her journey in TMF. And then it's just a chance for everybody else to meet people maybe that they haven't met before. They can talk about TMF. They can not talk about TMF. And hopefully people make some new friends through that process also.
I love that. Now, is there a price associated with that?
No, it's completely free. Completely free. No, completely free to attend, which is sort of a hallmark of stuff that I do. Like, I really think it's important that we try to create spaces that are lowest barrier to entry for people to be a part of. And obviously, I represent Epista Life Sciences, who are a fairly decent sized life science consulting company that do obviously a lot of work in the TMF space. And so Epista will be covering the costs and sponsoring the event. So it means that everybody gets to come along and have a good time at our expense. And hopefully they do so.
I love that. So I always ask all my guests at the end of the show 2 questions. The first one is, what's your favorite TMF document and why? And I'm dying to know from a TMF.
That's my favorite TMF document. What a question. I don't know what my favorite. You know what's funny? I probably think my favorite TMF document is a medical license for the stupidest reason. I have spent, like many of you may have already seen, the last decade or so at an eTMF technology company. When we were doing demonstrations of the software, the one document that I would always bring in was this expired medical license to demonstrate what you do with an expired medical license. And it was always this really old, almost like a driver's license. I think it was a New York medical license card or something like that, of this guy with a 70s haircut, and the medical license was expired and there was just information that wasn't correct on it. So for no particular reason, I would say, if someone says, what's your favorite, I'd probably say that, because it just brings back fond memories. I'd be curious to see what others' favorite documents. I have to listen to some of the other episodes to get a feel for what other people's favorite. What are some of the top ones that you've heard?
Well, to be honest, you're the first person that said medical.
Okay, perfect. What's your favorite, Nicole? What's your favorite TMF document?
I would probably say like the delegation log, because like the same thing, the memories associated with it. I worked with it for so long, and it's just sort of like my roadmap in the TMF of the expiration dates and who's on the study, who's not on the study, why don't I have this, we need that. Everything just sort of roots back to the delegation log.
I guess coming from a CRO world also, maybe that's why.
I remember Karen Roy on the show, she said TMF plan, which is very TMF.
Yes, that's very TMF. Yeah. TMF risk management plan. Yeah, those are sort of the core founding mothers and fathers of this industry will probably say those things. So I guess medical license is not very fun, but at least it has a personal memory for me.
Protocol is pretty popular,
right?
Because everybody has to read the protocol that's on the study. So
I feel like that's a cop out a little bit, though. That's like cheating. That's like cheating. It's kind of like, I think even, sorry, Karen, even TMF management plan is cheating. That is cheating. You have to have a story behind it, I think.
So what's the best career advice you've ever received, and who's it by?
Oh, this is hard, because I would have loved to have thought about this, because I'm sure I have received tons of great advice, but I have such a terrible memory. So I'm going to put a pin in it, and if I ever come back, you can ask me this question again, and I'll make sure I'm prepared for it. But what I will say is, at least when someone asks me for advice, or maybe sometimes people don't ask me for advice, but I give it to them anyway, is that I think you have to focus on when you're coming up, whether you're starting at your career, whether you're in the middle of your career, or even if you're at the end of your career, making mistakes is just so important. And I would never have done some of the things that I'm most proud of in my life or in my career if I hadn't had made mistakes and learned from them. And it's so cliche. I appreciate how cliche it is. And I think I probably said like, "Oh, make mistakes" when I was younger, and like, "Yeah, making mistakes is good." But I never really truly understood it until I made some big mistakes, right? Until you make some foundational, fundamental mistakes that really change the way you think about something, that's when you really understand that like making mistakes is important, right? And I've met so many people in my life who have been great at that, have been sort of fail fast, let's make mistakes and break things and figure out what works and what doesn't work. But I've also met lots of people, especially in my personal circle, that are almost afraid to make mistakes. And I sort of empathize so much with those types of people. And the advice I always give is it's, you've really got to make mistakes for you to be able to improve. And in fact, making those mistakes is better. You learn far more from, making a big mistake or doing something wrong than you do from winning or from getting something right. So I'm sure I'm going to attribute that to my dad. I'm sure my dad said that to me at one point.
Well, Oliver, I am just filled with like so much gratitude that we could just make this happen.
Yeah, this was fun, so much fun.
And the inspiration just after talking about like the TMF community and the culture. Like, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me.